Thank you for joining us. I'm Paul Wilson.
And I'm Chris Emke.
And this is Diesel Performance Podcast. Guys, we are talking about everything fuel for the next few weeks. We actually lined up and pulled in some really awesome interviews. We got some legit
held your
experts.
own for once, man. I'm pumped. I'm pumped.
Everybody who helped out, everybody who jumped in, we definitely appreciate it. But we do have some really cool stuff. So today we're going to be talking with Matt Roberts of Springboard Biodiesel.
Yep.
Super excited for that. And of course, I think we'll also be checking in with Jeremy Garnett down in the shop talking about, I think we're changing a fuel filter today. So
how ironic is that?
Really knocking out this fuel system stuff. Of course, before we get started, we want to give a huge shout out to our sponsors. You can support us by supporting them. So first of all, Duramax Tuner Calibrated Power. Chris, got a huge sale going on right now.
15% on tuning, 10% on turbos. We have a couple door busters. 50% off on the 2020 Plus Fords tuning, and then $250 off on conversion kits. If you guys have any questions or have interest in anything, you can go over to the website, duramaxtuner.com, or you can call the shop, 815-568-7920.
That's right. Of course, WC Fab, Worley Custom Fabrications, have been a longtime sponsor of the show. Since the very beginning, we appreciate them, love working with them. And you can get all of the highest quality powder coating and custom parts for your truck. Check out their website anytime, wcfab.com.
And then XRG Performance, they've been supplying us on all of our fuel system needs for years. And they're just a great wealth of knowledge. You can visit them at xrgperformance.com. Or if you have any questions regarding the fuel systems, you could always give us over at Calibrated Power a call and we could help you out.
That's right. And we don't want to forget XDP. Thank you for coming on and being a sponsor here in the recent past. They've been a great sponsor to work with. They've supplied us with some really cool content.
One-stop shop, man.
We've worked with them forever. We do love XDP. We use a lot of even XDP branded parts here at the shop on our belts and things like that. So big shout out to them. If you haven't heard of them, stop what you're doing now and search xdp.com. You'll be able to find everything you need for your diesel truck.
Right to them.
Stick around, guys. We got an awesome interview coming at you with Matt Roberts from Springboard Biodiesel. All right, folks, here we are with your favorite time of the episode, and that's where we bring on an expert to the show to talk about, their expertise. And today we're definitely not short of supply on expertise. So, Chris, I know I'm excited to bring on Matt Roberts from Springboard Biodiesel. Matt, how the hell are you?
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. I'm glad you guys are doing this and are interested in biodiesel.
You know, biodiesel, there's been a upswing in interest, I think, especially over recent things going on in the world. So we appreciate you taking some time and, giving us a little bit of a general, knowledge, on what to expect and questions they ask and whatnot. So thank you.
It's funny, Chris and I, when we first started talking about this, Chris, you came up with an idea of asking just, I think, some a little bit more broad questions about like biodiesel. And as we sat down and we started to put it together, we realized, hey, we don't know anything.
No.
Like we don't know anything.
No.
So we wanted to start at the beginning of the supply chain, right? Like if I'm a DIY guy, which I think a lot of us are, and I want to do something at home, sure, I've seen all sorts of YouTube videos about how to make biodiesel. There's instructables of like 5 steps. It looks so easy. And then I read some of those and watched some of those
You're
videos.
Like, what did I read? What did I watch?
And it was, I realized there's probably some holes in the DIY system that like just going out to your shed and doing it's a bit of a far-fetched idea. So Matt, where does Springboard Biodiesel come into play in this system?
So excellent question. So basically we got started because we saw all of those DIY machines out there, and we wanted to make something that was automated, that was easier to operate, and that would reliably make a high quality fuel. And we found that a lot of people who had those, there was a company out there called Fuelmeister a long time ago that made something similar to this. People who had those machines, they ended up spending a lot of time making biodiesel, and they didn't have any time for their jobs or doing anything else, their families, anything else. So what we did is we put together this machine that you basically load up with your inputs. You need to have a feedstock oil, which most of our customers convert used cooking oil. And that's the most common one out there. and is the easiest to come by generally. It's getting harder and harder, but then you have to put your other inputs in, which are methanol, sodium hydroxide, and in our system, we use a little bit of sulfuric acid. And so our process, it's a dual reaction. It's automated, it's easy to operate. And I would say you probably only need to put about 20 minutes of time, maybe 30 minutes of time into making a batch in it. And in a way, it's a lot like a kitchen appliance. You load it up, you turn it on, and you walk away. So that's how we got started. That was the impetus. Let's make something easier and better that's rugged and is going to last longer. It's also, safety is a big issue because one of your inputs is methanol, and it's flammable, and it's also poisonous. And so, you want to make sure that your equipment handles that safely. So we put a lot of time into the design of a machine that uses all explosion-proof motors, explosion-proof pumps. The heating system is super safe. It supplies indirect heat through the metal. All the tanks are made out of 14 gauge 304 stainless. So yeah, we've been doing that for 14 years, making these machines. And so far, it's been a long time, but so far we have units in 50 states and in 39 countries. We just sent some off to Namibia.
Oh, wow.
And I didn't know where Namibia was until I took the order.
Heard it until just now.
I was going to say, I don't feel so bad now. Right.
But it is just north of South Africa and to the west. But yeah, so it can be done by anybody. You can do it very easily, but it can take up a lot of your time if you're going sort of the low budget route.
Okay.
Now, with this machine, your customers, is this more of like an industrial thing where like I need a shop to have this? Can someone just stuff this in their 2-car garage and start making fuel? Like, what does that look like?
Chris is moving out stuff this weekend.
Yeah, the footprint is pretty small. So our smallest unit it's called the BioPro 190. It'll make 50 gallons in 2 days, and it will fit in a broom closet. It is 22 inches by 22 inches at the bottom. And I wish I had an image of it. I do somewhere. Here, I'll show you a picture. Let's see. See that machine there right next to the chef?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's that tall. That's the smallest unit we make, and they get bigger from there. And so, but if you had, say, a 10 by 10 or a 12 by 12 shed or a garage, it'll fit in there nicely. And we have plenty of people who operate them in their garages.
That's so cool.
That's pretty neat.
That's such an awesome option to now think of. Everybody who's listening right now is like doing mapping in their head of like, well, if I didn't have any of the kids' bikes.
If the wife's car wasn't in the garage.
Right. Now, I want to pull back here a little bit because I have a few questions about biodiesel just in general. And I think that maybe somebody who has 14 years experience with making the equipment around, doing your own biodiesel, I'm hoping you can help us out with some of this. First of all, let's talk about cost. So my understanding, just from a quick Google search and knowing anything about DIY fuel, is that the idea is it's much, much cheaper than it's ever going to be at the pump. Can you give us like a ballpark on what that looks like?
So this is a great question, and this is what gets most people excited about biodiesel. Now this is a big if you can collect your used cooking oil for free, because let's say you're a restaurant or a school, you're feeding all those people, you already have it worked into your business model. If you can collect that oil for free and put it in our machine, you'll make biodiesel for about $1 to $1.15 per gallon. That's
the oil for free.
Right.
So all the other add-ons. Okay.
Right.
Those are all the other inputs, including electricity, to make the biodiesel. So, obviously not everybody can do that. And we get a lot of calls from people who are super excited about biodiesel, and they ask about the equipment and everything. And then I ask them, so do you have any feedstock oil? And they're like, no, I hadn't thought of that. Where can I get that? And so you have to have that. And there's a broad range of feedstock oils out there. Some of it is expensive. Like if you were converting raw soybean oil, you'd have to buy it from some soybean oil broker. It would probably end up making your costs higher than the price of diesel, if you're going that route. But there are so many other waste oils out there that you can convert, including animal fat. So that might sound a little weird, but beef tallow, if you can liquefy it and filter it, you can put it in our machine and make ASTM grade fuel. And so you just have to calculate, what is the cost to me to collect that beef tallow, add that to $1.10, let's say, per gallon, and that is your total cost.
Now, I would have to imagine there's probably guys out there that, okay, the cost is the cost, but they're doing it from an angle of they just want to know what they're putting in their vehicles. They want to know what they're putting in their tanks, and they have the ability to control that versus they don't know when the last time that fuel station serviced their pumps or something like that, I would assume.
Yeah, and I think that walks me into grade. So when you mentioned a grade of fuel, how do I know the fuel's good? How do I know I did it right?
Right. So the U.S. government approves for sale ASTM D6751 grade biodiesel. And if you hit that spec, the federal government says you can run that in any diesel engine. And so what you want to do is you want to hit that spec, right? And, every fuel has a grade that it has to meet, including diesel. But ASTM D6751, that's the one that biodiesel has to meet. And it makes sense, obviously, like you said, you don't want to put crappy fuel in your incredibly expensive equipment and ruin it. So if you meet that grade, you're good. And our equipment meets that reliably if you follow all the instructions and, you use the right inputs at the right purity, you will meet that. And good question.
Is there a way, if I like to second guess myself, right? I've done it my whole 32 years of life. If I were to follow all the inputs, okay, is there a way to test the fuel to make sure it hits that minimum standard before putting it in a vehicle?
Right. So there are a lot of tests you can do at home to make sure that you have good fuel. Now, if you want to know definitively that you've passed all of the tests for the ASTM, raft of testing, you would want to send a sample to a tribology lab, a lab that can test the fuel and tell you all of this data,
Right.
how much, what your free glycerin is remaining in the fuel. Is there any water present? And they do tests. One of them is called the Ransomat test that measures oxidation. And that's not something that's easy to do at home, but there are a couple tests you can do that are really simple, one of which is called the 27-3 test. So once you've reacted the biodiesel, if you take 3 milliliters of your raw reacted biodiesel and mix it with 27 milliliters of methanol, pure methanol, 99.9% methanol, you put it in a little beaker, you gently mix it and put it on a windowsill. After 5 minutes, if there is unreacted oil in there, it should drop out to the bottom and you'll see a little line of it at the bottom. And that's just a good way of knowing if you've had a complete reaction or not. There's another test called the pH lip test, which basically works on color. And there are several others you can do. There's tutorials out there and videos showing you how to do them, test for soap, test for water content. And a lot of that's available on YouTube. We have some of those videos on our website.
That's really cool. I like to know that I can do a little QC at home.
Yeah, of course.
And then simpler, like we're used to like oil analysis,
Yeah.
right? It's like that's just a part of what you have to deal with is sometimes you have to send it out to somebody that has the right equipment to diagnose it properly. And if you're doing, I mean, your smallest batch is 50 gallons, right? So like, if you're doing larger scale batches, how often are you really running them? How much are you going through? All those things I would imagine would play into it. But can we also talk about how it impacts vehicles? I've done very little research, admittedly, around like converting my vehicle to run biodiesel. Could I just grab any diesel truck and start running biodiesel in it tomorrow if I start making it in my garage?
Well, the short answer is yes. You can run biodiesel in any diesel engine. And in fact, biodiesel and diesel mix beautifully. So there's a good visual show you can make where if you get a glass of diesel and a glass of biodiesel and you have some good backlight and you pour one into the other, whoosh, they mix perfectly, and that's what happens in your engine. But there are, in the newer engines, the ones that have DPF tech on them, if you use a very high blend of biodiesel, you can slowly start to dilute your engine oil. And this can happen because, this will happen in those because, you know, there's an injection into the engine chamber after the initial explosion, and it's sent in there to remove particulates, to burn off any particulates that might be in there. And it's designed as an emissions control to reduce particulate emissions. But the thing about biodiesel is it has a higher flash point than diesel. So when it gets injected in there, it doesn't all burn off, and it can slowly start to seep past the pistons and end up in your engine oil. So how do you manage that? If you have one of those trucks or one of those engines, it's best to just use a lower blend of biodiesel. So if you were to use B20, that's 20% biodiesel, 80% diesel, you'd be completely safe. All that said, we have a lot of customers who run B100 in those engines anyway, because they're big enthusiasts. They're saving a lot of money on their fuel. And what they do is every like 1,500 miles, they will drain off some of the engine oil from the engine and maybe add a little bit more on top, just to make sure they're not diluting that. And so that's an extra step you'd have to take if you were really gung-ho about using high blends. But you don't have to. You could just use more diesel, I suppose, in the mixture.
One of the things, like, again, Paul and I are novices when it comes to this. I was kind of always under the impression that biodiesel is going to be better suited for like a mechanical injection engine where there's a little bit more give and take versus being involved in like a common rail high pressure injection motor. Is that more or less, like, I understand the emission standard, but, you know, cut the emissions out, we could talk like a early 2000 era common rail engine. Is that going to hold true that like the mechanical lower injection pressure engines are going to be a little bit more welcoming to a biodiesel?
I think you're right. I think that they are better suited for those engines. And, you know, a lot of people end up buying 2002 to 2004 Volkswagen Jettas, for example, because just because of the layout of that engine, it seems to be especially welcoming to biodiesel. But like I drive a 98 Dodge Ram 2500. It's a 98 and a half. It's got a 24 valve. I use B100 in it all the time. And it runs great. It's so solid. One of the things about biodiesel, and I don't want to rave about biodiesel too much, but you know, it has better lubricity than regular ultra low sulfur diesel. And lubricity, I mean, by that I just mean it burns with less wear in your engine. And so a lot of these older vehicles will quiet down a little bit if you add even just some biodiesel to the blend. You know, I was going to say ultra low sulfur diesel, it burns a lot with a lot more wear now that those extra sulfates have been taken out. The sulfates were there for lubricity. And because of emission standards, those have been removed. Just adding a little bit of biodiesel to your diesel blend can help to smooth that out and add that lubricity back in.
I mean, I definitely can say biodiesel is definitely a hot topic. I'm a TDI owner myself, and when you get into a topic of an ALH or a BRM TDI engine, biodiesel is discussed. When you think of biodiesel in the truck world, a 12-valve Cummins or a 24-valve VP44 motor, similar to what you're talking about, they're very welcoming, you know, as far as that goes. Then you get into the common rail stuff, like you get on the 2.8 Colorado page, and there's a lot of questions regarding it, but not a lot of expertise because they're not as, you know, it's not as normal to have it on those than the older vehicles.
And that's my question too, is that even if I'm not really that concerned with the dilution of oil, am I going to run into things like quicker regens, right? Like, is it going to gum up my high pressure fuel system and my injectors, my pump? Like, am I going to have problems on that end of it? Am I going to have problems with the DPF and the EGR now because I'm running this type of fuel? Like, that is where my questions with reliability would kind of play into the system. It's interesting to hear that I also have to worry about oil dilution.
And it's manageable is the good thing, but you know, the biodiesel, it's not perfect. I mean, it also will gel at a higher temperature. You know, at 32 to 35 degrees, it'll first start to cloud and then it'll gel. I've had to go out to, I used to have a Mercedes station wagon. I used to have to go out sometimes in winter with a blowtorch and heat up the fuel filter and the tank just to get it flowing when it was super cold. But you know, there's other solutions for that as well. Besides mixing more diesel in, you could put a heat exchanger on your engine to use that heat from the radiator fluid. Once you get up to temp, you're fine, right?
Right.
But it's starting is tough. You could always garage your vehicle. You know, a lot of common sense solutions, but
not if I gave up my garage to make the biodiesel.
Exactly. Yeah, only so much space.
Listen, I love it. I think it's one of these technologies that's out there that it's a great option for a lot of diesel owners. Is it everybody? No, man.
It's discussed around a lot of diesel owners, right?
And I think there are still some guys out there who like, man, if I'm trading my truck in every 3 years anyways, like...
Yeah, who cares? I'm not going to have to be the one to deal with the aftermath.
You know, like if I'm the type of guy who modified my truck in the first 1,000 miles of owning it because I wasn't that worried about warranty and I'd rather have it run the way I want, and like those type of options, like there's a lot of guys out there who are in different situations than maybe you and I who have a truck and they're like, this does sound great. Now, if I'm traveling across the country, do I have to worry about mixing back and forth? Like, hey, I usually use biodiesel, you know, in my Jetta or whatever, and I drive every day with it. And now all of a sudden I'm going on a trip, you know, all the way across the country. I'm not going to be able to carry all my own fuel with me, obviously. Any problems with mixing back into just regular straight low sulfur?
You can go back and forth and no problem. So there's no range anxiety. One thing you do have to keep in mind, though, is if you get an engine, a truck, let's say, that's run for many, many miles on diesel, and then you switch over immediately to a high blend of biodiesel, let's just say B100, 100%. You will, you know, biodiesel has a mild solvent quality to it, and it will actually scour out the tank and the fuel lines, and it will take out all those coked up deposits left from the diesel, and that will end up in your fuel filter. And so after driving for about 1,000 miles, maybe 2,000 miles after you've done the conversion, you'll start to feel that power loss and you'll curse and you'll say, why did I get into biodiesel? But actually it's just your fuel filter, and you just change that out. And it's amazing how much gunk will come out of your tank. We've cut them in half with a hacksaw before just to have a look. It's inside and it's gooey and gross. But anyway, if you change that out with a nice fresh filter, your engine will run super clean, and it will continue to run clean.
That's awesome. Okay.
Now, a question that I have too is, if I wanted to take my '03 Jetta tomorrow and convert it over to bio, and I get a machine and I start doing it, are there anything that I need to do to the vehicle? Like, do I need to modify the vehicle to accept that?
Right. So rubber is bad. Rubber in any of the fuel lines is bad. It will start to dissolve under when biodiesel is pushed through it. So Buna rubber is bad. There's this material called Viton, and now it's in most engines anyway. It's some kind of fluoroelastomer made by Goodyear, and they decided to call it Viton. And anyway, that's completely compatible with biodiesel. And that is what you want to make sure you don't have on your engine. Make sure there's no, the seals on any of those pumps, if they were rubber seals, you'd want to replace that with Viton. But I don't think that rubber is common now in engines. I don't know. Do you guys know? Is it commonly used in seals?
There's not a lot of rubber in a factory fuel system in the newer trucks. It's all going to be, metal junctions and what have you.
Yeah.
That was like pre-91 or something. Yeah.
Okay. And there are a lot of forums and a lot of groups that I saw that do specifically ask this question, where if you go in and you just search what vehicle you have, there's going to be guys who discuss, hey, not only, yes, you're going to need to modify things, but I saw a lot of guys who have kits. So so
there
are
there's
guys
DIY kits for the conversion for the vehicles.
And of course that's going to depend, if you have something obscure, you're going to get less support.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
One thing that comes up a lot is people often say to us, oh, I'd love to get into biodiesel, but I don't want to have to convert my engine. And so we always tell them, no problem. If you have a diesel engine, there's no conversion required. You can run it on biodiesel. And a lot of people are thinking of those conversion kits that go in your trunk that heat up vegetable oil.
We were just talking about that.
You can run your engine on vegetable oil if you have a system that's installed and it's done right. We don't knock that. That works. I don't think it's technically legal, but who cares?
It's just a technicality, right? It's just a technicality.
Yeah. But you can if you don't do it right, you can destroy your engine. You can start to have I love this word, polymerization happening in your engine, and you can get goo on your pistons and whatnot, and you can destroy your engine.
Yeah, if you know anything about goo and pistons, they don't go together.
They go real well, and the valves, everything.
Okay, what about performance though? So let's say I'm Chris and I'm running my TDI and I'm used to getting all 85 horsepower when I'm cruising down the road. I go to B100. Would I expect to run at the exact same power? It's got a higher flash point, you had mentioned. So does that mean I get less energy out of each stroke?
Well, so 8% loss of BTUs if you're at B100, right around 8%. And it can vary. You can add additives to decrease that number. If you have B20, I think it's right around a 2% loss.
Okay. Yeah. So that's your scale. All right. So, hey, listen, if you're hitting the dyno circuit and you're talking about biodiesel, I've never met you. If you want performance, there's a lot of ways to get it. B100 is probably not your bag, right?
Out of the questions that we've asked, is there anything like as a buyer that like maybe we didn't ask or that we should have asked to be more educational in this interview?
Well, no, you guys have asked all of the right questions, and cost, safety, benefits, how is it made? Those are all good things to know. I would just say that the diversity of feedstock oils is pretty exciting right now, and you can't do it without a feedstock oil, obviously, if you want to make it yourself. But there are seed oils, like, for example, I went to Botswana in 2020, and I visited the University of Botswana in Gaborone. And they were some of the first people, I think, to ever convert trichilia seed oil into biodiesel. And so I'd never heard of trichilia before. It grows wild everywhere in Botswana. The seeds fall from these trees, and they collected it, put it in a press, and they pressed out this oil. They put it in one of our machines and made biodiesel out of it. Beautiful biodiesel. And it's just so great that, in Botswana, you can do that. In other countries, I'm sure they have some indigenous inedible oil or edible oil, preferably inedible, that can be converted. And, for a while there, algal oil was sort of the holy grail of biodiesel production. Everyone talked about it. It seemed very promising. And it's sort of gone away because I think the cost of making it has proved they couldn't really lower it down enough. Maybe they'll get there now that diesel is so expensive. But animal fats, I've heard recently about black soldier fly larval oil. If you can believe it, somebody is harvesting black soldier flies and pressing them and getting the oil out and making biodiesel. So there's a lot of options out there, and they're all pretty exciting.
How many flies?
Man, you need a lot of those.
I don't necessarily wonder how many flies. I wonder, so somebody had black soldier larva, and they were like, it looks a lot like oil.
I'm squeezing this.
Looks a lot.
Yeah.
Those are the questions that I would like to ask one day.
They discover this, but it's happening.
That's awesome,
That's
though.
insightful.
You know what? Again, I mean, it is super cool to see such a diversity in feedstock, and that is, like you said, the beginning point of really you have to know, how am I going to start this off? So, restaurant owners and things like that. I love that idea
Of hey, I have a small fry shop or a small hot dog stand, and this is in abundance for my lifestyle, right? Or I tow around, one of my trailers for the fair circuit, right?
I mean, I was just thinking, get it in with a high school or a middle school and take the oil from them, and then you're set.
So the beginning of your plan starts with robbing a school.
Yes. Well, you're helping them move their waste. They have to feed all those kids. The deep fire's got to get clean.
It's gotta.
You're doing them a service.
Well, those schools, they could do it themselves. A lot of them are self-mandating that they should reduce their carbon footprint. That's one thing actually we haven't discussed, is just according to the California Air Resources Board, biodiesel emits 90% less CO2 and about 50% less particulate matter than regular diesel fuel in its whole life cycle of production. So it is also clean burning.
That's a lot. That's a lot.
That would have been good to know when we were asking about the emission standard stuff like that. That is impressive.
I mean, schools, they're feeding all those students, and they want to reduce their footprint, and they're also teaching students about alternative energy. What better group than to get into small scale biodiesel?
Then the practice
And they
what
have
you
to
preach
bus
and
them
do
in
it.
and out, which is
and they all have buses,
right?
Right,
Which are all diesel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Oh, that's crazy.
That's such
that
a
might be
cool
the
thought.
next business move for you. Start hitting down schools.
And we've been hammering at schools for a long time.
I love it. Matt, this was so much fun. I've learned so much about biodiesel in this interview. Folks, if there's more questions that you have, you're going to want to jump on over to Fans of Diesel Performance Podcast Facebook group and get a hold of us. Matt, now if they have questions for you or for Springboard Diesel about the manufacturing process and the parts and services you offer, how could they follow up with you?
Please definitely send us an email. You can send it to Matt at springboardbiodiesel.com or info@springboardbiodiesel.com. Our website's got a wealth of information. You can check that out, and you can always call us too. I would just say out there, if you don't have the oil, please don't call. Get the oil first.
Start there. Yeah.
Otherwise, you could own the biggest paperweight you ever bought. Because you need to run something through it, and so, but we're open. We'd love to talk to anybody who calls.
No, we appreciate the time, Matt. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys.
Thanks for joining us today, guys. This has been Paul Wilson.
And Chris Emke.
Make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll talk to you again soon.
I lied. Not ready.
What the fuck? Not
Dude, he's just fucking up the tape.
dude. Paul,
I'm here on my time. I'm gonna fuck shit
we
up.
have paid sponsors.